let go of the critic. Kick the critic out of the room. Because first of all, it's, the Western white culture that says it has to be good by their standards. And second of all, it's something that we're doing with ourselves, through ourselves, and for ourselves, and just let it come out and see what comes out. Third of all, your dumb ideas come first and your great ideas come later. And that's scientifically documented.
Welcome to the Origins of Creativity podcast, brought to you by BooklingMedia, where we discover the magic behind creativity through the stories of passionate creators. Listen in and fill your creative vessel with delightful insights and uplifting tales.
Hello, you are listening to the Origins of Creativity podcast. I am your host, Becky Gehrisch. Today we have a special guest on the show, a creativity expert with a unique PhD in creativity studies. I am excited to learn some of the ins and outs of creativity. This is going to be a great resource for our listeners. Today's guest's career is multifaceted. She is a creativity expert, poet, writer, artist, speaker, and as I mentioned before, an educator with a PhD in creativity studies from The Ohio State University. She has authored Teaching Difficult Students, Blue Jays in the Classroom, published poetry and professional articles, and written and illustrated 3 picture books. She believes creativity takes life apart and reassembles it in magnificent ways, helping us to endure, understand, and sometimes heal. Welcome to the show, Nicole Gnezda.
Hi, thank you for having me, Becky.
Absolutely. I'm very excited because as I interview guests on the show, I'm always thinking deeper and wanting to get an idea of what's the brain part happening here. What is going on? And I'm so excited to have you on the show so that we can kind of get that idea, get some, creative creators thinking about where it's coming from and what they're, using it with, everything. So to jump right in, the main thing I want to know is, why is creativity important?
Well, because it's one of the essential parts of life, perhaps human life, but I think bigger than that. And also the essence of the universe in ways that we can talk about later. But it's a way that we learn about each other, the way we communicate our humanness, the way we build empathy, the way we explore the boundaries of what we can know. And as you said before, it's also a way that we investigate ourselves, explore ourselves, and often heal ourselves and each other.
Yeah, so when people were sitting around a fire way back when, this was something to, I'm assuming, for survival. You need to be creative and capturing prey and your meal. And I mean, and in that sense, would different animals be creative as well? Like, would a wolf be creative? Or, is that something that ties in with all kinds of life on Earth when it comes, like mammals, for example?
I don't think we know that yet. I think we know that animals have some people believe that everything has some level of consciousness. And I think that creativity is consciousness, or a form of consciousness, or something we do with our consciousness. That's a better way to put it. So, there's primates who make tools, use tools, that kind of thing. But to me, creativity is what is the process, what we go through, what we do, more than the product. So at this point, we can't say, are the animals experiencing this? All the stuff you kind of alluded to, what we do, what we think, how it happens. We don't know if animals go through any level of that or not. And I happen to think that our scientific community right now is not addressing that about us either.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about that. What do you mean?
Well, the official scientific definition of creativity is making something new and useful. And that's the operational definition that they use in all the brain research, the neuroscience, most of the 21st century, late 20th century research on creativity, is to see what's happening in the brain. And very, very, very product oriented.
Right. It sounds like you were saying, the primates who are making a tool, but it doesn't sound like our version of creativity that we speak of today necessarily.
Right. At least not that most people would believe that we know. So the science comes from this product-oriented view of creativity. And if you look back at where it came from, the people we have identified as creative, and by the way, creativity is a modern Western culture term.
Oh, okay.
The people that we've identified as highly creative, we've identified through their product, right? We can't talk to Leonardo da Vinci and see what was going through his head. And he's one person we might be able to infer some things. But we don't know what was going through their heads. And we don't know what creativity is happening to the serfs and the laborers. They're the ones that are learning the science in the field and inventing tools and all that. But we don't talk about that scientifically and in the body of research and literature. So the people that are identified and what they're searching for in the research is something that has to do with why we get these extraordinary, unique, world-changing things happen, right? And what I want to do, which is what you were talking about, is to look at the experiences that people have, the things they say about their creative processes, what happens to them during their creative activities, their thinking and their making, and consider that data as well, consider that qualitative data. So I'm trying to compare that to what the scientists are coming up with.
So it sounds like it's beyond, and they're studying beyond this tool, beyond what is useful and what it means as a being, a person, correct? As a human.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how do you go about researching this? I'm assuming you take a lot of creatives and see what they think, or are you looking? Just tell me about it. I'd love to know.
It's my life. So this is a long story, but I went to elementary school at the Ohio State University Lab School at Ohio State, which was a nationally known leader in educational research. And learning was organized according to kind of your individual curiosities, your individual talents, your ways of approaching stuff. And it was project-based rather than factually based education, right? And we had a lot of choices, and we had art every week, every day. I can't remember, it might have been every day. Integrated music and art and cooking and history. And so I grew up thinking, obviously, that was a creative way of approaching life and learning, right? So I grew up that way. Have always made stuff, not very well technically, but I made stuff, wrote poems, made art growing up. And I had the kind of family that made a studio space in the basement for me and, encouraged that. So that helped. Got to college, was a fine arts major, and noticed that so many times I'd say, can I do this as an independent study? I don't connect with this teacher. Will you let me do this as an independent study? Not knowing why, but I did. And then I became an art teacher and worked with these kids and saw how it opened up kids, how it settled kids, how kids that were non-functional in the rest of school or not as functional came into the art room and flourished. Then I had 3 kids who are highly creative, and I began to wonder what you just said, what you just asked. What is this that makes these kids different and flourishing, in the arts? It could be scientifically, it could even be in math, but mostly we're not taught that way, so kids don't find their flourishing in science until much later. But I wanted to know why, and I wanted to know why I was more like them and why I was different.
That is amazing. So we'll probably get to this, but I was just thinking as you were speaking, I assume you'd recommend everybody probably ideally learn this way, correct? Like this is the best
yes,
way.
Absolutely. Yes, I would.
The way to learn. This is what we could dream about, and some, I feel like a lot of preschools tend to have this, but the public school system,
exactly.
It's not there. Okay.
Exactly. The politics of education is pushing us away from that kind of learning, that kind of I can plug in and learn my way kind of learning.
Right. And just kind of, here's the facts, get it in you. Yeah, and I think that just really resonates with the folks who, have gone on to have creative careers. They pulled something from that, had some experience in their youth to propel that, and use that as a tool to actually learn more than
Yeah,
just memorizing or the testing. So
lifelong learning.
right, yeah, and exactly, like loving that that the whole process. And what if you love it, you're going to learn. So you continue to research creativity now, and you're studying the history.
I'm studying everything.
It's like everything kind of becomes this creative outlet for, like the science, everything that people are
Right.
using, they're using it creatively.
Or could be. One of my first professor I had in my PhD program, my one creativity class that the university offered, piloted this class because he was frustrated that his PhD students, when it came time for their research, couldn't come up with any ideas of their own. They did a lot of replicating of studies, which is important in science, but he wanted to understand creativity so he could figure out how to guide these students to come up with more, bigger ideas. And that has to do with curiosity. And so maybe the schools had drummed the curiosity out of them. Maybe they thought what they were interested in wasn't important in academia. I don't know. But that was the purpose, was to bring creativity into the science and the academics.
I found that there were, different classes that I've had, and one was at the Ohio State University. It was new that semester. I don't know if it kind of cycled back, but it was the physics of light, and the setup of the class was
Mm-hmm.
obviously more hands-on, experimental, small group. Not a whole lot of lecture, but then a lot of teaching assistants that would come around and prompt us to think. That was enjoyable. I mean, I can't even tell you how fun that was when yeah, I was so used to, the other way
Mm-hmm.
where you're just kind of like learning and not the interaction. And the small group, I think, really made a difference. So are you, gathering people's academic lives, or like the stories of who they are, or what they're doing?
I'd say this matter of factly. This is how it happened to me. Um, I'd find a quote or an article or something in the newspaper about creativity, and I would clip it. And I don't know where I put it, but I have this pile of stuff. And recently I have gone through it and tried to organize it into categories of, topics that relate to different parts of the study of creativity. But I just kind of collected them. And I have, probably for an academic, not a lot of books, but it seems like a bazillion books to me of all kinds of personal stories and academic books, and Leonard Cohen, and Austin Kleon's Steal Like an Artist, and all kinds of things. And I found out I had trouble reading and learning content. I mean, I did well in school, but it was hard for me. I had to work at it. And I found out what works for me is to buy the book, and where I underline, write notes in the margin so I know what, this is about inspiration, or this is about motivation, or whatever. And then I put that in the front like an index,
Oh,
out of
okay.
order, on all these blank pages in the book. So I have all these books that are marked. So now I go through them, and here, these page numbers are about novelty.
Well, that's a great way to do it, because at least you have something there to kind of go on versus it's just the book. And
So I have all of that, but it's not orderly. It's all there, like its own little world of information. And now, one of the only good things about the internet is that I have all this stuff at my fingertips. So if I'm interested in Einstein's views on creativity, there they are in front of me. Right. So it's making this research a lot easier. Plus, you can email people and contact people. You don't have to go across the country or the world for interviews. So that helps when you're afraid of people. I would never cold call
just kind
anybody
of
or
reach
anything
out.
like that. So collecting, reading, marking up my books. Oh, my high school teachers would have had a fit if they saw me mark up my books. And I'm still teaching, so I'm learning a lot. Yeah. So every time I'm with a group of students, I learn.
And do you think that teaching plays into your learning and research and creativity?
Absolutely. And I think it's what made me want to look at it from the personal experience, the phenomenological is the word for it, personal experience part of it.
Right. So, I'll teach art classes, and I find that as I'm teaching them, it's almost like it's reinforcing it for
Mhm.
myself, and then it's stronger. It's like this extra bond, and I think that I don't know, maybe kids could be teaching other
Yeah.
kids, the things that they've been learning, and I think they have that kind of ownership on it, and then they can share that with the other student, and then they get a feedback, and I think that's kind of pretty cool too.
I have two thoughts because I'm creative. I got two thoughts at once. One is, I forgot them both. One is that in the art room, you have the flexibility curriculum wise, because there's not all these big tests.
Right.
Don't mean anything. But you have the freedom to let kids divide up, to talk to each other, to work individually. I can be working individually with one person who's having a lot of trouble coming up with an idea of pulling stuff out of him or her or their selves, while other kids kind of can take care of each other. So people can go on their personal creative searches.
That's very interesting. I was just thinking about the students who might have more trouble with it, being
Mhm.
creative, just in the art world. Do you think there's anything that certain people have more of a creative path or direction, or genetically disposed to have creativity, or is it something that it's
All of that.
learned? Okay. Is it a combination then of my mom was really creative, so therefore I either learned it, or was I born with that brain structure to be more creative?
I don't think anybody knows that for sure.
Okay.
Here's my hypothesis, and it's two parts. And one part is because there's certain cognitive things that happen that some people's brains, just like some people are better at math and some people are better at learning foreign languages, global languages. Some people are probably better at the kind of thinking that is in the process of creativity.
Mm.
Um, and others are, my financial guy is absolutely wonderful at managing my money. And I could never, ever, ever be trusted to do that and get the numbers to come out right.
Right.
Math is not concrete for me. The numbers change, right? So I
Yes.
think we have uh, genetic predispositions. Environment is real important, like my university school experience. But one example is that I had a friend when my kids were little. My husband, who was not, he was very creative, but he was not in the arts. He was a coach, um, an English teacher. But he got together with the shop teacher and built this table for my kids that had drawers and room for two kids, because at that time we had two kids, and put their names on it. We put all their paper and their crayons and anything we could find that was art supplies in the middle of the table. He had like a storage space. My neighbor, whom I was close to, and my kids were the same age as those her kids, kept the crayons on top of the refrigerator, and the kids had to ask permission to color.
Oh.
So, without casting any judgment, because I don't, about her, because I love her, our kids grew up in very different environments.
Right. Having the freedom and having the access to the tools, and be able
Right?
to just whenever they have that
The
feel and
opportunity,
pride
yeah.
to do it.
But yeah, yeah. When
Right.
they felt like they wanted to make something, they could go make it, as opposed to it had to be with permission to make.
I get that with certain things, like if you've got to, paint all over the carpet, or, age appropriate things. Yeah, and I think that's very true. It just we've talked before on the podcast about playing, and
Mm-hmm.
that tying into creativity, and that's kind of what you're doing with creativity. And that made me kind of want to circle back really quick to, you were talking about the definition of creativity, or the term creativity is a Western term. What
Yes.
would other places call it, see it, view it? Is that play thing, or is it something else?
Well, I think we're the only. And I'm talking about us as it started in the 1800s, in the 19th century.
Okay.
When we actually saw creativity as a concept to be studied.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was in Victorian England. So think of what culture was like. Think about what elitism and hierarchy was like. Right. So it looked at a very elite group to begin with, by a very elite group. It was also a time in history when European folks and eventually American folk were going to Africa and saying this is primitive and this is invalid and this isn't real art. But Picasso would appropriate it into his paintings. So nobody looked at creativity beyond the famous artists, the famous scientists, the famous composers. And there is a concept that some people have some researchers have where they talk about big C creativity and small c creativity. So big C, is Einstein and Picasso and
All the others.
yeah, so famous. I was trying to get contemporary, but I couldn't think of one. And then small c creativity is like the rest of us who make art in our basement and make our own Christmas cards or Christmas decorations or make our own kids' Halloween costumes. That's little c creativity.
So I wonder, I mean, this might be factual and you might know, back then, is it because, the Industrial Revolution, there was more free time, more luxury, or not luxury, I guess
Opportunity,
opportunity and
space, yeah.
space to explore those kinds of things. They weren't like 12-hour shifts at, wherever they were working and, the field had come in, would they have that freedom then to explore this and kind of even, like you said, study it at that point in time?
The upper echelon people did.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I
The
was
elite
imagining. Yeah.
people did, right?
Yep.
And if you think that science was first, our kind of science was first described and implemented in the 1700s. Science was rather new, our kind of science. Yeah, empirical science was kind of new. And the first scientific study that I'm aware of creativity wasn't called creativity, but it was a guy named Galton who believed that elite family, highly creative, successful families had highly creative, successful kids. And it was generational, therefore it was genetic. And his theories led on to eventually developed into eugenics. Also, it was looking at successful, white, educated, materialistically successful people in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And from there, we began to have this sense that there are the haves and the have-nots in creativity and what makes the haves so spectacular. And from the anthropological point of view and the 21st century point of view, what made them successful was that they were white, rich, and had opportunities.
Correct.
And that the other rich white people looked at their stuff and said, oh, yes, we're going to elevate that. We're going to turn this into a myth.
Wow.
We're going to, Einstein is the smartest man who ever lived, right? Well, I'm sure he's not. And I have questions about how much of his work was his alone and how much was his interaction with his wife.
I was going to say, there's studies that things are coming out showing that his wife did a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And other scientists too, it's like, oh, their wife did this, or like.
I just read they're on Facebook now. They're coming up with, there's a women's thing that shows you all these women who invented these great things that never got credit and the men that got credit for it. And there was a time when women weren't allowed to put their name on any legal document but their birth certificate and their marriage certificate. So their brothers and their fathers and their husbands took credit for a lot of the things they invented. To expand your ideas about the cultural aspects of creativity, in other cultures, in tribal cultures of the past, in Asian cultures of the past, creativity was not about inventing or making something new or making a new piece of artwork that nobody had ever seen before. So African art, for instance, the sculptures, pre-contact sculptures, were made to be receptacles to hold spirits or masks to cover your face so that you could take on the spirit of an ancestor or a god.
Right. Egyptian pyramids, it wasn't about the sculpture of the pyramid. It was about containing the pharaoh, the spirit, the afterlife things they'll need, and all of those.
Yes.
Wow.
And this hieroglyphics was about giving them written instructions for how to move on to the afterlife, all these kind of things. Yes. And in Asian art, it was about the spiritual experience of the brushstrokes. If you look at Sumier painting, it's the experience of the brushstroke, and they didn't believe you were able to do anything innovative until you were very mature, until you were an elder. And you look at the Navajo sand paintings. I'm going off and off here, but
Oh, I love
if
it.
you look at Navajo sand paintings, they were done for healing.
Very spiritual origin, apparently.
Yes. Different outcomes, different purposes.
Right.
So then I ask, is creativity about novelty, making something new and innovative, like we think in our culture? And does our art always have to be different and push the envelope, those kind of things? Or is it about something that humans do that may have different kinds of outcomes in different cultures and situations?
So the purpose of that art, the purpose of many different pieces of art might have been spiritual.
Yes.
And even today, if somebody's making something, it's to invoke a feeling from themselves or express that feeling. And that feeling is, what about us? The core of who we are, the passions that we have, which is, in that sense, I would imagine, kind of on par with this, spiritual
Yes.
side, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So even if
An
one isn't,
experience.
very spiritual, they might be, even, they might not consider themselves spiritual, but they might have that same background,
Right.
underlying motive,
Underlying
reason.
experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That.
Especially when you separate spiritual from religious.
Right. Right.
So it's whatever that connection we have with life beyond our concrete everyday kind of life, kind of experiences.
If a mom is quilting, a blanket for their
Mm-hmm.
their child, and
Mm-hmm.
instead of just being a functional piece, it could just be black, it could just be all one
Right.
color. They chose colors,
Mm-hmm.
they
Right.
chose
Right.
something that kind of showed their love in a way, right, through those choices.
Colors and textures and
Right.
stitches.
And patterns. So they might
Yes.
not have considered it art prior to, that
Mm-hmm.
knowledge of it, but it was there, and it was expressive. It was expressing their feelings. Okay.
The pursuit I'm on is to understand if that is the same process, maybe at a different level or a different quantity or a different outcome. But if it's the same process as what, a great inventor goes through, I suspect it is.
Right. And like you were saying, different people might be lifted up, and stories about this person, but other people might just have the same thing, or no.
Yeah, so here's an example. My grandmother was very, very poor. She was uneducated. Her husband and her parents were immigrants, and they were living in a subsistence way. When she was pregnant with my mom, she cut out a whole bunch of pictures for magazines and stuff and made a picture book for my mother, for her baby to be. Okay. Now, if you look at picture books for kids, if you're Madonna, whatever you write, you can get published as a picture book. There's so many people in the news that are famous for many other talents besides art and writing, who are getting their picture books published because they have privilege. So is it different because Madonna maybe sold 1,000,000 copies and my grandmother didn't have the materials or the background to draw the pictures herself? I don't know.
Art is subjective, but there have been rules created around art, right, to
Mhm.
judge what is better than one piece versus
Yes,
another.
yes, yes.
And if somebody didn't have that education, like your grandmother, to have that training, does that change that mindset of, her art is just as creative and just as powerful, and compared to somebody who's had all of that, the opportunity to learn it traditionally? Or
Yeah, and I think that's the question. Is it something that people experience without having to be highly regarded? Is it only those that are highly regarded that are the highly creative people? And Howard Gardner wrote a very famous book called Creating Minds. And his thesis was that to be a creative person worth studying, you had to be a paradigm changer.
Are you saying that that's kind of like that a new thing that kind of pushed it, got
Yes, yeah,
attention, and then,
yes.
yeah,
Or change the world, kind of, or change
yeah.
the art, or change the music world. And what about enslaved people? Think of all the things that they invented in order to survive, or to do the crops, or to use peanuts, or whatever it might be, right? And all the things that they wrote, or those songs that they came up with without any of the privilege to have any of it become famous and recognized.
Do you ever look at preschoolers and see how they're interacting with each other? Because I can imagine a kid saying, I like that. And it might be this bizarre, adults might think there's nothing to that, but
Yeah,
a kid might think it's
yeah.
great. And how do we as adults like that same thing where we've got this set idea of what is good, what is wonderful, what is artistic, and kids kind of have that origin, maybe that beginning sense of like humanity, of they might like something just because they like it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was teaching preschool, I was taught this, and I think it's very important. You don't look at a kid's, when you're an adult, not to look at a kid's picture and say, what is it? But to look at a kid's picture and say, what would you like to tell me about it?
Oh.
And then it unveils what may not show up because they don't have the skills yet.
Or is it also maybe the meaning behind it? Like we
Yes,
think so much of
exactly.
art as this
Exactly.
concrete thing. It should be mommy, daddy, a house. And it might be,
Mm-hmm.
this is my feeling of something that
Mm-hmm.
they can't express
Exactly.
exactly
And
that
it's
way.
exciting, and you hear their thought processes, and my goodness, what's been going through their head. Is that the creative process in their head? I suspect. And my grandson, who, when he was 6, in aftercare, which was not a highly educational setting, they just had some scraps of paper, and he made a collage, and it turned out really good with layering, 3-dimensional from layering, and you could see he made all these decisions about where to put the shapes. So I asked him to tell me about it, and I've actually written that up. So I
Oh,
have his creative process according to his, report of what was going through his head when he did that.
oh,
So
that's
the
great.
answer to your question is yes.
Absolutely. I love that. It
Yes.
just makes me want to go, ask a bunch of kids now
Mm-hmm.
what their work, what they're thinking
Yeah. What
behind
were
it.
you thinking when you did that? That could be a whole master's thesis
Oh
right
my
there.
goodness, I love it. Oh, wow. So, do you ever get to look at brain scans of
Yes.
people? Oh my gosh, that is cool. All right, so tell me about that. I just don't even know where to begin to ask a question about it.
Well, I haven't seen the brain scans except for my son, because in the beginning of the surge of gifted education back in the 80s, I think it was, he had a brain scan to see how gifted kids' brains work differently from others. That's sort of a different topic, sort of. But I've done a lot of research, or I've done a lot of reading about the brain scans. And here's what we think happens. And I hope that the neuroscientists out there will be patient with me. But I'm going to try to water it down to the way I understand it and the way other people can understand it. It seems that there's different things we do in the creative process. Some of it is, to simplify, some of it is the idea search, and some of it is the making and evaluating of ideas and that kind of thing. So it seems that, and you're not supposed to say this, but when I read it, this is what I'm reading, that there's right hemisphere activity that is visual, imagery, that I call it clump thinking, where you have like things that all put together, but you haven't put it into words yet. So it's just there. It's ideas. It's combinations of ideas. Also, the right brain is very associative. You were talking about this earlier. So it sends out like a web. It sends out thinking in many different directions. My favorite example is Carl Sandburg's poem, one of his Chicago poems. And I imagine him sitting at his desk in Chicago where the weather's really bad and there's probably snow outside, or if the snow's coming in and it's foggy and blah, blah, blah. And he's writing, and all of a sudden he noticed that the cat had jumped on his desk. And he writes, "The fog comes in on little cat feet." So he's writing about Chicago. He's noticing the weather. He's noticing that suddenly, the cat came in and he didn't even hear it. And he put all that together. That's associative thinking. That's right brain thinking. And that's where the innovation comes from, because you're making different connections than normal.
Right. Other people might say, "Go away, cat. I'm trying to think of this poem. I've got to
Yes,
get everything
right,
down." And you're
right.
interrupting it instead of embracing that and noticing it. It's
Yeah, and
yeah.
and it happens automatically. It happens automatically to people. And if you watch people talk and people talk metaphorically, you can see all this. In fact, a lot of our technology now is that kind of connection. We talk about a mouse, even though it's not a real mouse, right?
Right.
We have icons,
Right.
which used to be religious things, right? And so the language you use is very much associative, which I think is because the people that invented all this many of them were very creative thinkers and visual thinkers.
And that's what also possibly stuck. They might have come up with
Yeah.
something that
Mm-hmm.
and it was so unique and different that people
Yeah.
recognized that and it
Mm-hmm.
caught on. Okay. Wow.
But, some left brain thinkers would have invented the mouth and called it the manipulator, perhaps,
Oh,
But
yeah.
so the right hemisphere is the associative thinking part and the visual part and the nonverbal part. So therefore, it's not the organized part. And it's the part that can be comfortable living with ambiguity or not knowing the answer.
Right. And do people, okay, this might be a completely different topic, and we might have to do a part 2 because I'm just excited about learning more about this. And when it comes to neurodiversity,
Yes.
if people are paying attention and giving priority or attention to different things that others don't want them to,
Mm-hmm.
like a kid looking out the window in school, teacher wants them to be
Yeah.
looking at math, and that's not interesting. They're going to look out the window. They're finding that interesting. They're making different connections. Are they training their creativity with that, or are they just can't help but pay attention to what's exciting to them to then become creative? I don't know what that would mean or what.
I think I have some ideas on
Right.
what that might mean. One is, I would say probably they're inclined to be paying attention to what's outside, their curiosity, rather than the redundant rhythm of the teaching. Here's the science about what's happening in our brains at those times. And I would say some people's brains are better at certain networks than others, but they think there's 3 basic networks that are related to creativity. Network means where certain neurons connect with other neurons, like networks of people. One is the executive functions, and that's the one that says, this is how you use your grammar, and don't speak without raising your hand, and hold it so you don't interrupt class so you can go to the bathroom, and follow the rules, and spell correctly, and do your math in nice rows and legible handwriting. That's executive function. And our society is really, really big on our executive functions. Then there's the default network, which is your daydreaming, your hypnagogic, looking out the window at the birds, being relaxed, chill, but thinking, but just not thinking in this other way. That's where the creativity comes from. And then there's the third network, which has to do with another part of neurodivergence, which is called the salience network. I didn't make up these names. People invented the mouse did not make up these names. But the salience network, which is what decides what you should pay attention to and what you shouldn't. So if your salience network if your executive function network is a little weak today or always, and if your salience network is not the typical way people are supposed to choose what to pay attention to, you're going to be paying attention to that cool bird you've never seen before out the window, rather than the linear left brain approach. And math is not linear in left brain, but the way it's taught is linear in left brain.
Oh.
And I think that's why so many folks have trouble learning it, especially creative folks.
All right. That would be, I would love to dive into that too. Okay. So that is so interesting. I don't even know how to wrap my brain around all of this connection now.
Cheers.
Yes, and I'm thinking, okay, we're gonna have to do a part 2, which I will, and if you're willing.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
for our creatives out there, for yourself, for me, for anyone, is there something that we can do to harness our creativity when we want to better? I mean, in a
Yeah.
better way,
Mhm. Yeah.
where it's not just this random thing coming at us, or we get a just a random idea or a dream. Let me know. Yeah, tell me what you think. I don't know.
Yes and no. I one of my experience again. I have multiple thoughts. I'm a clump thinker. I'm a right brain creative thinker, and talking helps you to take those ideas apart and understand what you're thinking. So that's what I'm going to try to do when I answer your
So
question.
that's one of the answers is talk it out.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
But also, you need to get onto this default network right brain way of thinking, which you can't do if you're worried about paying the bills. That you can't do if you've got a final exam tomorrow, or an assignment you haven't completed and it's already late, or if there's no food in the fridge and you got to go to the refrigerator. The store. These kinds of executive function left brain things take up your energy. So sometimes just figure, I can't do it right now. It's Christmas. I got to do all this baking. I can't work on my book right now. But the other thing is that when you do have time, we need to get ourselves into this default network. And also, one thing we haven't talked about is brain waves. So beta waves are your active waves, right? We're using them now. But the alpha waves are the imaginative, daydreaming, creative waves. And that's been documented that creativity happens with this alpha wave type energy. So we got to get there. We got to turn on our alpha waves, turn off our beta waves, get into the default network. And so there's things we can do. You can listen to instrumental music. You can meditate. You can dance, especially, modern ballet movements, not, really vigorous dance. But for me, maybe for other people, vigorous dancing,
Sure.
break dancing would do it for them. Some people do a lot of reading, and that helps them get their brain in the place to start writing. Sometimes they say just, pay attention to what you're feeling.
And it takes practice, I'm sure, for people who might not find creativity easy or
Mm-hmm.
haven't, had that opportunity as much to explore it. But those are, great starts for
Mm-hmm.
them to channel that. And
Yes, yes. To get themselves in the channel is more what I would say, in that flow that's the creative process.
right. And for the professionals out there who, they've got their systems, they just might need reminders or nudges or try a different way to
Mm-hmm.
get, a different idea to come.
And it gets very frustrating when you get writer's block or something, but sometimes there's just too much stuff going on in your life to do it. And also, the people that struggle with creativity, one of the things I would say to them, and I have to my students, is let go of the critic. Kick the critic out of the room. Because, first of all, it's, the Western white culture that says it has to be good by their standards. And second of all, it's something that we're doing with ourselves, through ourselves, and for ourselves. And just let it come out and see what comes out. Third of all, your dumb ideas come first and your great ideas come later. And that's scientifically documented. More astute words. But that's true. And so if you stick with your first idea, which the left brain thinkers, I know the teacher makes an assignment, I go home and I do it tonight. So, I got my work done ahead of time. They're not going to get to the creative ideas. They're not going to get to the meat of what's inside them that wants to come out.
Even if it's dumb, even if it's weird, play with it.
That's right. Go
just try
take it somewhere.
Yeah.
And one of the examples I have is if I was teaching high school and I said, and a kid wanted to make a work of art about love. So what would they do? A heart with an arrow going through it in red. And I said, no, push that idea. So then they might put lots of red hearts on the page, and I'd say, no, push that idea. And then I have pictures of a Brancusi sculpture, which looks like a concrete block with a line between it with two people kissing. And then I have an abstract sculpture that isn't about love at all, but it's the relationships of the parts of it. And so we can see how an idea can be pushed. Also, you can start with love. And I had a girl talk to me about this. She did an assignment, want to do a project about love and her boyfriend and how crazy she says was about him. And she started talking about how it was kind of abusive and controlling. Well, at that point, if you pursue your thinking that long, it might not be about love anymore. It might be about what you might call anti-love,
Sure.
hurtful love, abuse, her family history, men, feminism, who knows where it would take you. But I would say to these people, forget the outcome, do the quest. The quest is what counts.
Oh, that's perfect. Okay. I love that. I'm just thinking about how to apply that, how to engage with others with that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just wonderful. With your own creativity,
Yes.
how do you apply all of this knowledge then to your art, to your writing, to your work?
Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't.
Oh,
I
good.
mean, I really, really appreciate that I'm retired and I have time to pursue my own creative work. I value that. It does something for me. I can't help it. I have to do it. But I'm still caught up in that. Is the product good? Is the product good enough? Should I, enter an art show? I want to you send out 100 poems and maybe one gets published and that's about the system. That's not about the poem, but still, so I get caught up in that. But I know I need to spend time creating and I know I'm very aware of what's happening inside me. So it's about getting lost in it. It's about losing touch. I call it a creative spell. Some researchers call it a trance, and there's some evidence that it is similar to a trance, like a Native American vision quest trance. There's some scientific evidence that I'm finding that might see that they're the same kind of things.
Does that bring endorphins or different chemicals to the brain or calm the brain? Is it survival? All these questions are.
It calms the brain because you're using your alpha waves and you're in the default network, which is not a place that drives you and that criticizes you, right? It's an experience, and this is the spiritual part again. Is it my experience, or is it something in the universe working through me? Am I just the tool, the instrument, and the left brain to put it down? And there's that could be a whole session because there's a whole bunch of stuff about that, and most important, that almost everybody I've met or read about, and you can hear it all the time, the idea came to me. I was in the bathtub and the idea came to me. Right? So that opened some questions. So I enjoy living a life knowing this stuff and understanding this stuff and recognizing it when I see it. But the other part to your answer is, it's made me a lot more accepting of myself. Why did I have to do independent studies instead of following some rote teacher telling me how to teach? Why did I do independent studies in the summer when I didn't have to take any credits in college? Why did I want to do that? Why is my current husband, who's a wonderful guy, very organized thinker, very focused thinker? I never realized how unfocused I was till I was with him. But, it drives him crazy because, like, I'll put something out so I remember to do it, and he sees that it's sitting out and he puts it away. All right?
Yeah.
Why can't you remember to do that? Niki, why did you say the wrong thing then when you thought you said something else? Niki, why do you leave things, and it's not just him, but why, do you see that on the table for 3 days and you haven't taken it downstairs yet? Then it has to do with, what kind of attention I'm in when I walk past it. It has to do with this scattered thinking. Do I have trouble on telephone calls? Because the phone rings, I pick it up and I open my mouth and two thoughts come out at the same time. Clump thinking, right? So it's helped me be a lot more accepting and forgiving of myself, my kids, and value the skills that my husband has that I don't have and would never have. And it all makes sense now.
I'm sure, because of those who I've interviewed and just know in my life, that lines up with most of their experiences. And to appreciate it, and I think that's a great thing to, at least for this part, is to have that appreciation and patience and realization that that's okay. That allows your creativity to be what it is, and that's who you are. I love it. I love it.
And I think it has serious implications about education in schools
Yeah.
and why kids that can't do well or sometimes do well in the regular standard classes walk into the art room or the shop and flourish.
And I bet you there's, everybody, and myself included, could definitely relate to that. Like you were saying with
Mhm.
math and with,
Mhm.
rote things that you're having to just, for what purpose, and then later on, you apply it. You might apply it in your art and say, okay, now I'm really interested in it because it's getting this thing that I'm wanting to do with it. So,
Right. When
absolutely.
it's part of your quest, then you learn it. When it's somebody else telling you this is what I think you should learn, and then you don't. Maybe you play the game, maybe you don't play the game. Maybe your brain can't play the game
Oh my
if you
goodness.
don't learn it.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I am absolutely thrilled that you were able to take the time today to talk to me and the listeners here about all of these things. And I am excited and hopeful that you could do a part 2 with me.
I would love
And
to.
oh my gosh. While we wrap up, what is there anything else you want to leave with our listeners, a closing thought, an idea, just something, anything that you want to share?
I guess what comes to mind is that what I would offer people is encouragement to know yourself, to watch how your brain thinks, to watch where your ideas come from, to value them. Even if you make something that comes out, you think it's crummy, maybe it's not the thing that matters, maybe it's the you that was in it that matters. So give yourself a break and jump in and see where you or the universe takes you.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you so much, Nikki, for that insight and your thoughts and your knowledge and your collection of stories that you've been able to share with us. And where can people find you online? Our listeners would love to know.
Well, I'll tell you my website address, but it is under construction, so be patient with it.
Okay.
It's too much, too beautiful, because it's what I wanted to do, maybe not how a website should be. But it's www.compassioncreativityandteaching.com.
Wonderful. And as always, I'll put that in the show notes, as along with some of the books you've mentioned, and just to, people wanted to look at those and to learn on their own. And I wanted to thank our listeners for joining us. If you enjoyed this podcast and found it valuable, please share it with others so we can reach people who might like a bit of inspiration on their own creative journey. Until next time, happy creating, and I'm Becky Gehrisch.
Hey there, creative minds! Are you ready for the next burst of inspiration? Make sure to subscribe to the Origins of Creativity podcast in your favorite podcast app for all our latest episodes. Visit BooklingMedia.com/podcast for show details, links to connect with us, and so much more. This has been the Origins of Creativity podcast, where inspiration meets imagination.